Hello, I'm Tracy with MeatRx. I'm here with a special guest, Ryan, today, and he's going to tell us all about his success story. Hi, Ryan.
How's it going?
Great. Thank you for coming and sharing your journey with us. Can you start by telling us what was your life like and your health conditions prior to coming to a meat-based diet?
Well, I would say that my life was, I would assume, pretty similar to most people on the standard American diet. And when I was a kid, it was all cereals and breakfast bars and stuff going to school, and all that kind of stuff, Pop Tarts, normal things, right? And as I got older, the moment I could feed myself, it was just right to the McDonald's, right to Jack in the Box, just all the fast food places, and that's all me and my friends did. And and soda. Oh my God, did we get down on soda? So just all those types of things. And when I was a kid, I think I cracked 200 pounds by like 12 or 13 years old. And now I'm 6 foot. So for me, I try to be in the around 200-pound mark. This feels like a comfortable weight for me. Um, but yeah, so I cracked 200 pounds as a kid, and I just never looked back. I kind of floated around in the mid 200s in high school. And by the time I was 18, leaving high school, I was up into 280, 290. And I kind of bounced around. Like I never wanted to hit 300. And so I kind of bounced around from there down to, maybe 260. And that was kind of my range, like a 40-pound swing that I would have. And I just ate everything and thought it was okay. And whenever I felt like I was getting too much, I would just reel back a little bit and just kind of, you know, deal with it and try to lose a little weight. And then I'd get complacent again and just bounce back up. And I dabbled in all the different things that are out there as far as ways to control it. And, like most people would just be wondering why it doesn't work, or how other people have it so easy, or join a gym and play all those games, and nothing ever did anything. And I would always go back to eating the same way and get the same results, and started to feel crazy after a while. So, that's kind of how the eating used to go, I guess I could say.
Right. Oh, okay. So you're pretty young still, but
Yeah,
you've
I'm
been,
38 now.
you're what?
I'm 38 now.
Oh, okay. And so did you have any health conditions that went along with weight gain, or did you just
Yeah.
decide one day that you needed to change?
It was kind of a lot of things kind of piled up on me. So when I was a kid, of course, I just thought I was just fat, just overweight, and I didn't really think anything of it. I mean, I didn't like it, but it was just kind of the reality. I was the kid that wore a T-shirt in the pool and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people can identify with that. But so what I did notice was, as a kid, I had horrific allergies in school, and just all the time. It was horrible. Seasonal stuff, when the dust and the pollens would kick up in spring and fall, just terrible. And so I always had allergies. So I was always taking allergy medications, Claritin and stuff like that. And then the other thing I had is I always had headaches, and I was really prone to migraines. My mom is really prone to migraines, and I just assumed it was hereditary. So I thought maybe I just got it from her, and it's just a fact of life. And so like taking Vicodin or something like that to bring a migraine down was a pretty normal part of my existence. I would do it a few times a year. And so I had that going. And then the other thing was, as a teenager, especially with the sodas and things like that, I started having a lot of heartburn and issues like that. And then colds, I thought getting colds, once a year, maybe twice a year was totally normal. And I had those all the time as well. And then as I got a little older, like once I got into my 20s, colds kind of shifted into not just a regular cold, like where you'd have it for maybe a few days, a week, something like that. It would shift into a cold for a few days, and then a horrific sinus infection that would not go away unless I went to a doctor and got antibiotics. And I started getting really frustrated with that, because and I would try to, I'd be taking all the zinc and the vitamin C and just popping all these things, trying to beat it. And it would just go for weeks of just horrific sinus infections, just throbbing pain and can't breathe. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. So I'd finally break, cave, go to the doctor, get them stuff, take it, and then it would go away. And I'd be back on, doing what I do. And then a year later, I'd get another round. I'm like, this is so dumb. I'm like, how is this just a normal life? So I always ask myself these questions. And then in my mid 20s, I noticed that when I would try to really do anything strenuous, like if I was swinging a sledgehammer, help somebody push a car, run for any real length of time, my heart would just pound, and I could feel, my like blood pressure, kind of like, heartbeat in the back of my head and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, good Lord, and I'd have to stop and catch my breath. I'm like, what is this? And it would make me dizzy to the point where I'd start to like, the elevator door would start closing and I'd start to get like sound would start muffling. And I'm like, oh man, I'm about to pass out. So I'd like really have to just stop what I was doing if I was pushing it that hard. And so that was a weird surprise. And yeah, I kind of was, this is just not good. And so I've always kind of not liked being overweight, but there was a number of things that just kept building over the years. That just kept saying, look, this is bad. This is bad. We're going to keep doubling down on how bad this is. You need to make some changes. And it was just a lot of stuff like that. And so it was always on my mind to find the solution, figure something out, stop. But of course, the procrastinator and everybody says, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, which turns into a lifetime for most people. So I always pushed it off. And then there was another weird little thing that I'll just bring up because it's, kind of something I can talk about later. I had a bone spur develop on my right foot. And that didn't occur until like my early 30s. And I didn't notice when it sprung up until I'd hit it with something. I'm like, ow. And it was this weird little bump. Where did this come from? And it kind of got to a certain size and stayed there for a number of years. And that was really strange too. But yeah, those were kind of some of the health things that I went through, and everything that would kind of spring up would make me try something, whether it be join a gym or, even like the Slim Fast stuff back in the 90s and things. Like I tried all of those different things. I'm going to do, meal replacement stuff and just all these different, fad type diets. I had a lot of friends be like, oh, we did juice cleanses where we just ate, just drank juice, like vegetable juice broth stuff that we would make. And that's it. Do that for a week and you'll lose all kinds of weight and get yourself on the right track, et cetera, et cetera. So I've tried so many different things, and everything had marginal effects at best, and nothing really had any actual solution. Everything just didn't work. And so it, wasn't until, much later that I decided to do a little bit more research, particularly into diabetes, because I had a friend that got diagnosed with it that made me really want to dig into understanding how and why. And that was the thing that flipped for me, was that push. I knew that I wanted to get better, but when my buddy got diagnosed with diabetes, he's mentally challenged. I've been taking care of him most of his life. And when he got that, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, he needs to get better. I'm like, I'm not letting people pump him up with all kinds of meds to keep his numbers in line. I'm like, we need to fix something. And so that started me down the rabbit hole of podcasts on the subject was my biggest go-to. And then every book that every doctor and scientist recommended, I read and checked out all types of, I think I went through 20 something audiobooks from different doctors talking about diet, nutrition, and health and all that kind of stuff, and diabetes and whatnot. And I just started diving into it. And that was kind of how that whole thing transitioned, if you will, and changed everything for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so how did you come upon the carnivore diet, and what did you think about it? And did you jump right in? Or I know you said you've been a carnivore for 3 years. That's a really long time. Can you remember? Did you have transitional issues? Yeah, it was definitely weird. Not so much getting in directly into the carnivore, because what I did is, I spent a lot of time on the Rogan podcast because he talks to quite a few interesting people. And when he was talking to some people like Dr. Rhonda Patrick and stuff like that, I was really interested in a lot of the kind of keto aspects that were starting to emerge at the time. And that the interest in that started in December of 2017. And so around that time, I started thinking, and also that Christmas, every Christmas, I would get on the scale and see that 300. Basically, I'd be like 299 saying, I'm not at the 300 yet. I'm okay. It is 300, let's just call it what it is. And so, I'd see that and just be depressed and frustrated. And so I was about 300 pounds around Christmas at that time. And I was listening to some of the stuff she had to say. And I thought, I'm going to go ahead and start reeling back on some of the carbs. And my buddy had also gotten diagnosed with diabetes that Christmas. And so I'm like, I'm definitely going to reel back in the carbs. And then I got into a little bit more the how to manage diabetes with keto and all that kind of stuff, and the difference between carbohydrate fueled bodies and fat burning bodies, and what that means. And so I began to kind of dive into the keto aspect. And so I was doing, all the fats and oils and stuff like that, keeping that nice and high, keeping the carbs super suppressed, and keeping my protein really high, because I like protein. I was always the meat and potato guys, but I really liked the meat the most.
And so I kept that really high. And then I did that for a couple of months. And somewhere in that period of time, I can't remember when ShawnBaker was on there. But when Rogan had him on his podcast and I listened to what he's had to say, I think like most people that have listened to any medical advice their entire lives, really, listening to him, I'm like, man, that's crazy. And I had some friends that were kind of following my journey and stuff like that, people that, that I worked with and things. And I was telling them, I'm like, yeah, I was hearing about this guy that said, just don't have anything, like just meat. And I'm like, and they were like, that sounds nuts. And they just, like, nobody agreed with it. Everybody thought it was crazy. And I was thinking about it. And then as I was learning more about it, I'm like, I think he's right. I'm like, there is no metabolic reason for a human being to eat anything other than meat. I'm like, it's literally a complete nutritional profile. And I'm like, and it has no drawbacks. And I'm like, why wouldn't somebody try this? Because in your mind, you're so ingrained to believe that, you're just going to die of a heart attack right away or something. And I'm like, says who? Where's the proof of this? I started asking the simple questions. And I was arguing with a lot of people about it as I looked to make that transition. And a lot of people fall back on the simple, like, well, whatever works for you. I hate that argument. I'm like, yes and no. Like, what works for you is what works for you mentally. What works for you physically, it pretty much works for just about everybody, barring some unique scenarios of, allergies or something like that. Like a lot of people, they think that we're all so different. I'm like, no, really what it comes down to is, your body is always rebuilding itself. It's always replacing its cells, and it uses the material you consume to do that. And if you give it bad building materials, it's going to build a bad product. And your cells are going to do things you don't want them to do because they're built on a bad foundation. And one of my analogies I like to throw at people is it's kind of like building a castle. If you build it from stone, it's going to stay there forever. If you build it out of God knows what, cheap synthetic materials, it's going to crumble after so much time because it can't handle the UV, it can't handle whatever, natural occurrences or something. And then, and then people are like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, but, some people are good with being a vegan and they do great on that. And other people are good with, whatever, paleo that people like to reference and stuff. And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, but, you're acting kind of like people are, as different as, like a rabbit and, a chimpanzee or something. I'm like, no, we're all of the same species. I'm like, a better analogy would be something like, we're all from wolves, but, maybe some people are pit bulls and other ones are Labradors. They might have unique needs, but ultimately they're the same animal. So, have a little respect for the evolution. So I kind of see myself as, a sub-breed trying to get back to the wolf, and trying to find the path that's not going to lead me astray, that can't lead me astray because it's tried and true and it's real. And so processing all that information, I took the plunge and I thought, I'm just going to do it. And so I just started buying steaks, a lot of ground beef. I always loved eggs, so I do eggs quite frequently. I've always maintained dairy. I like my cheese. I don't like milk so much, but I do like cream. Either raw milk or cream is pretty good. I'm okay with that. But yeah, I kind of started doing it, and there was times in the keto beginnings where I definitely went through some weird changes feeling wise, like you'd feel like your digestive system is either like moving slow, not doing anything, because it's like you're digesting so much of the material you consume, you got so little coming out the other end. And of course you've got that stuff like repeating itself in your mind, like you're just compacting it all, you're gonna end up with colon cancer or something. Like there's all these weird things eating away at you, and I'm like, it can't be true, it just can't be true. And yeah, so when I switched to the carnivore thing, I had kind of already gotten over a lot of those weird initial things when it came to how my body reacted. And although I was still in the early stages, I think I kind of just came to peace with, I'm like, all right, this will level out. The not knowing what it's like to feel normal. I'm like, I need to find that. That did kind of occur to me. I'm like, this is the way it should go. And so I just gave it some time. And I would say it took a few months to really kind of come to a baseline where all of a sudden, when I consumed something, I could really feel it. I could feel how I digested it. I could feel what it was doing in my intestines. It's like I could really feel what was going on, and I felt okay with that. I was like, all right,
the body does work on a pretty clockwork schedule based on giving it, a regular diet, and if you deviate from that, which I have done, I can immediately feel the effects of that. If I give myself something, like there was one time I cracked a beer for the first time in like 4 months or something. And I mean, it hit me so weird, because I had almost no carbs up until that point. And I was like, wow. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, imagine if you took like a native like person that lived in the wild off a native, an ancestral diet, and just had never had anything like that, and said, here, try this. It would knock their socks off. They'd be like, this is disgusting. I feel terrible. Like, and all these things. And I think about everybody out there just consuming stuff at will because it's just fun and normal. It's ubiquitous. It's just everywhere. They don't care. They have no idea what it's like to feel normal. They have no baseline understanding for that. So for them, normal might be an average bubble gut situation where they're just uncomfortable, but they think it's okay. And I'm like, man, it's not okay. And so that was kind of my transition was pretty quick, but I stabilized fast, and I put a lot of thought into it, if you can't tell, and really kind of doubled down on it. And I went hard in the beginning. I mean, I really tried to find the answer, because I was serious about helping my buddy with diabetes, who I did help. He was diagnosed type 2, and he's not anymore.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Oh yeah. I know what you're saying about the foods you eat and how they feel. Which meat or which foods do you eat that make you feel the best?
The best is definitely any kind of red meat. Definitely, beef, of course, is definitely my go-to. But I find that pretty much any of the red meats I'm good with. I really like them. They seem to have the best reaction. The saliva really just hits it, and you get that satiated coming feeling, and I get that from some other stuff as well. I mean, I like anything with enough butter on it is pretty, delicious. But a lot of the other meats, like farmed pigs, farmed chicken, stuff like that, it just doesn't feel like it's going to do as much for you. It's okay, but it feels kind of lacking, and, and I can't really explain that, other than that's literally what it feels like when I put a slice of chicken in my mouth. I'm like, this is all right, but it just feels like it's missing something. And I think that's probably because it's true. It's like everybody knows, like farmed fish, for instance, if you have farmed salmon or wild Alaskan cod, there's a tremendous difference. And, I think that's kind of, we get the same thing with domestic animals. And I think something about pigs and birds are too easy to manipulate, where they're a lot like a farmed fish, and they end up really kind of pale and lacking in a lot of the nutrients that the meat would normally have. And whereas, even though cows are farmed, I think it's a little harder to manipulate an animal that size. I think they're a little closer to their ancestors than some of these other creatures. And so you get a pretty decent product, because whether I have a regular cheap, grain-fed steak, or if I have, some kind of wild, venison or something like that, it doesn't really seem to do much differently for me. And so I pretty much try to stick to red meats, but any meat is on the table. I'm definitely an all animal, all animal based food guy for sure. I'm down for whatever. And I'm an adventurous eater. Like, I'll hang out with people that want to try weird things, weird animals, whatever, sushis and stuff. And, I'll try a lot of things. I do enjoy eating.
Have you tried grains?
I haven't tried that. That is not, if it was available for me, I would have tried it. I haven't gone out and seeking it, but everywhere I do go, especially with my Asian friends and stuff like that, it's like we'll go to places and try some weird things. And Mexican people in Arizona, they have a lot of interesting stuff in their butcheries as well. So I've had a lot of stuff like that, but not grain specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me, how did your life change after carnivore? Did you notice things in the first month? Did you notice anything unusual or different that you didn't expect? And how'd your friend do? Yeah, I'm curious to hear about that.
Well, for me, I mean, things changed rapidly, because I went into it with both feet. And so, the thing on the forefront of my mind was, I wanted to learn how all this worked to help out my friend. And I also, of course, I wanted to lose weight. I was right there, cresting 300 pounds again, and I was super unhappy with that. And so I hit it hard, and fat just started dropping. And of course, everybody knows you lose water weight in the beginning and all that kind of stuff. But I kept on it, and I did really good. I mean, I went down 100 pounds in 185 days, and people couldn't believe it. Being a contractor, I have a particular Lowe's location that I shop at. And all the guys that work the register, the guys that work the sales counter and stuff, they would see me coming in there every day, buying materials several times a day sometimes. And we'd be talking about stuff. And they watched me just get thinner and thinner and thinner. And they were like, what in the heck are you doing? And so those were some of the people that I had the conversation with that were telling me the whole idea of eating carnivore sounded insane, but they watched the progress. And so I don't really think I made any converts, but I definitely put the bug in their ear. And a lot of people did make some adjustments to their lives. But yeah, that weight started coming off. And, the first things that I noticed is when you're heavy, everything hurts. Your back is pulled out of alignment. Your neck is usually tweaked. Your knees hurt. Your ankles aren't happy. Everything sucks when you're heavy. And so the first thing I noticed is everything started feeling better. Back didn't hurt as much. I'd get up in the morning and things wouldn't be so stiff. My knees could do a lot more climbing of ladders and things without being such a problem. And then other things started to follow right away. My heartburn, I used to have heartburn, take Zantac, stuff like that a lot. Just stopped, literally cold turkey. Like it never came back. And that was crazy. Like that stopped within a week. Like it just had no more heartburn. And so I'm like, wow. And, the other thing that happened, I would say probably in the first month was my blood pressure. Now, when I had my reactions to any strenuous activity and I could really feel how hard my body was working to hold on to consciousness in those moments, I went out and got myself one of those little battery powered blood pressure cuffs that you can do at home. And I would run it. And I mean, at rest, I would be like 99 over like 150 or something like that. Like it was high, not really high, but I mean, that's like chilling on the couch watching TV. And I'm like, this sucks. So I know that if I get out there and start swinging a sledgehammer, that stuff's going sky high. And so within a month, I started checking it and it just dropped like right to baseline. I was like 80 over 120, no problem, like easy. Sometimes 70 something, like even low and just totally chill. And I'm like, holy crap. And it stayed there. And then all of a sudden, like I could do those things with no problem. Now I can swing a sledge as long as I want until I physically just get tired. I have no reaction to it anymore. And I'm like, well, that's amazing. And then at that point, I was so psyched about my weight progress that I wasn't paying super close attention to the other benefits that I was beginning to have. Like, the summer came along because I started this whole thing in the winter. And as the spring and summer came along, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have allergies. I'm like, what the heck is going on right now? I'm like, I'm working around weeds and dirt and stuff and I'm not sneezing, like nothing's bothering me. I'm like, wow, that's really crazy. And so I'm like, could this be related? I'm like, that's all right. I don't know. So, and other things that I noticed too were like, oral health, your teeth feel really clean all the time. They never get grimy. You never feel like, oh God, I got to brush my teeth. That never happened. All of a sudden teeth are just great. So I'm like, okay, that's nuts. And then the other thing was the thing that probably surprised me the most is, so usually I would get a cold, sometimes in the beginning of the year and also in the fall. So the fall comes up and I was kind of boastful at that point because by the summer I had to shed 100 pounds. People's heads were spinning. They didn't know what was going on. I'm like, I don't know. I'm doing great. I'm like, I don't even get allergies. I won't get colds. No sooner than I said that I actually did get a cold, but it was really mild, right? It lasted like the stereotypical, like 3 days, gone. Never bothered me much. I had one day where I was actually a little runny, but I hardly had to do anything about it. It was really just a mild inconvenience at best. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, for the first time in years, I didn't have to go to a doctor to get antibiotics to get over this. Like, that's amazing. And that was actually my last cold. I have not had one since, which really blows me away. And then other things that come along with the body aches and stuff that were just kind of going away was headaches. It was pretty easy to give myself a headache. My back could be a little twisted. I could sleep on my neck wrong or something, and bam, I'd have a headache for the whole day. And if I wasn't careful, that could turn into a full-blown migraine, which anybody that gets migraines on the regular knows how debilitating they are. It's horrible. I mean, you're just down until it passes. And headaches just kind of stopped. And not only that, I haven't had a migraine since. They completely stopped too. And so, I mean, I can induce a headache still. I can get a headache, but it's really rare. And they're super mild. They're so mild to the point where I don't carry pain meds anymore. Like I was one of those guys that always had that big, like 500, pack ibuprofen bottle with me everywhere I went because I had to have it. It was a lifesaver. If headaches started picking up, I'd have to be popping 4 or 5 of those things to get through the day. And all of a sudden I don't anymore. And I don't even carry them because I literally don't need it, which is wild to me. That's those were the things that really kind of just throughout that first year, I couldn't believe how much difference that made. And it just solidified everything that I had kind of come to understand. And the last thing that was a total surprise out of left field, and it really irks me because I didn't even think this was possible, and I wish I had taken pictures to prove this to people, is that bone spur, that stupid bone spur that was in my right foot that drove me crazy only when I would hit it with anything. It disappeared this last summer. I don't have it anymore. And when you Google those damn things, allegedly they need surgery. And so I'm like, what? But it's not there. Like, it's just not there. And I'm like, and I didn't even think it would go away, so I never paid attention. And then one day I noticed, I'm like, wait a minute, what? And I'm feeling around where it used to be, and I'm like, there's no pain. I'm like, it's literally gone. So I've been geeking out over that one a little bit because I don't know why that happened, and I don't understand those well enough, so I don't speak to it too much. But it is a true thing. I had one, and now I don't. And even with that, my wife was like, I don't know, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, it's weird. Get on carnivore with me. So yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
That one.
Yeah, that's such an amazing story. I love listening to the success that people have on this. And you said you lost 100 pounds in how many days?
185 days. And that was with a 2-week trip. We did a drive from Arizona to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we took a 2-week period where I just allowed myself to say, all right, you know what, I'm going to kind of go normal. And I dabbled in fast food and stuff like that on the drive. I ate mostly jerky and things, but I had like energy drinks to keep me awake for the drive and that kind of stuff. So I stepped out of it for a couple of weeks and then got right back into it. So I even took a couple of weeks off, but yeah, I shed that weight in 185 days, which blew my mind. Nobody knew that was possible. And everybody thought I must have been just like starving myself or something. And I'm like, no, I'm not eating a lot. I'm keeping my calories low, which is how I'm losing the weight, but I'm not hungry. Like, I'm not starving because I'm eating food that is fulfilling my needs. And so I'm fine. You know, I'm like, I've been, the only thing I had to battle initially was that mental desire to continue to eat, you know, that checking the fridge 5 times a day because you're bored. You know, I had to fight that. As long as I kept my mind active and stayed out of that rut, I was great. I was fine. I didn't even think about it. You know, I would sit down and eat when I needed to because I needed nourishment at the end of the day. I would usually eat 1 time a day. But yeah, that's what I did. And it just fell off. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Wow. Wow, that is amazing. So how did your friend do? I know you said that he doesn't have type 2 diabetes anymore, but.
Yeah. So he got diagnosed in Christmas of 2017. And I, you know, as I learned more about it, I'm like, all right, he didn't have the budget to go full blown carnivore and just eat meat. So I was like, all right, your best option, your cheapest option is going to be, and especially because I knew his immediate family and people around him wouldn't like it if I was like, just eat meat. I knew they thought that would, figured that would be kind of crazy. I'm like, let's do this. I'm like, you eat, eggs, ground beef. I got him doing frozen burger patties because those were cheap. I'm like, you do as many of those as you can stand every day, and like a handful of like frozen broccoli. And I'm like, butter all that up in one pan, salt everything down that. I'm like, make that your meal as often as you can afford to. And I even came in and bought him stuff a lot to make sure that he keep doing it. I'm like, if you keep doing this, let's check your numbers and see how you do. And his numbers started, they were under control because of his medications. He was on glipizide, metformin, all that kind of stuff. But, they were high still, but they were on some semblance of control, but they started going down more. And I'm like, I would begin easing up on the meds and see where you're truly at. But of course, doctors didn't, want him to do that and everything. But I'm like, just keep doing it. And I'm like, in fact, don't even tell your doctor what you're doing because there's a good chance they might think you're nuts too. So I'm like, just keep doing what I'm telling you food wise and let them see the numbers as doing well and let them start backing your medications off. But I'm like, but stay on it, stay away from the fast food, no sodas, no nothing. I'm like, get off of everything, do this. I'm like, it's delicious. Eggs, ground beef, butter, it's great. Salt it, it's going to be fantastic. You're going to love it. Just keep doing it. And so he kept doing it. And I think he was about 6, 7, maybe even 8 months. I can't remember exactly how long it took, but his numbers dropped down to a pretty stable, just over 100. And they slowly just took him off with every 3-month checkup. And by the time his third 3-month checkup came, he was hardly taking any medications because his numbers were always fine. And they finally took him out of the diabetic range. And, and he takes like supplements now that his family wants him to take that help, but, or they think help. I don't think they do anything, but yeah, he was able to get out of that range. Now he lives a pretty normal life. And that was one of my original, reasons to do it. Because I really wanted to make sure that he didn't end up
losing fingers and toes down the road or something because he's having a hard time managing diabetes. I'm like, we're not doing that, man.
Wow.
So, and I'm not either.
Yeah. Awesome.
So,
Yes. That is so awesome that you were able to help him as you were getting helped yourself. And
yeah, like parallel it. It was really cool. It was a great year. My son was born that year too. My son was born in 2017, so he was still a baby, but it was a good couple of years. So yeah.
So cool. Well, thank you, Ryan, so much for coming to share all your information. Is there anything you want to add at the end here before we leave?
I don't think so. I mean, the carnivore community in particular, Dr. Baker, I mean, his words changed my life. They really did. They solidified a lot of scattered research that I was doing. And had he not kind of brought it in and said, it's no more complicated than this, had he not done that, I don't know. I might have kind of found it, maybe not. I'm not sure. I would have found something for sure because I was already kind of on the right track. But he made me jump in hard, and I did. And oh my God, that guy, I owe it to him. I really do. So, and Joe Rogan for hosting people like that, for letting people, giving them a platform to share truths when other people might not. So that's why I keep people like him and Meet RX close at heart, because I'm always watching what's going on, because it's important. More people need to know. They really do.
Cool. So have you found much benefit from like going on the Meet RX site?
I don't do much with it yet. I've thought about getting more involved in it, but I don't do a lot of social media. I just kind of peruse it casually. So, I figure I wouldn't really give it the time quite yet right now, since especially currently, I'm so busy with the things that I got going on in my life and this last year. But yeah, no, I do foresee myself being more involved with it and, getting on the website and things and, seeing what happens. So I definitely have an interest in helping people. I try to help everybody around me and have these types of conversations every chance I get. And, I would love to make time to do that on some scale where I really do help people on a regular basis. Cause again, it's so important. Important. I wish everybody could feel normal.
Yeah.
Learn what that is and fix their issues.
Right.
So, yeah.
You sound so passionate, and you really, I know you helped your friend and probably other people too, but that is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for sharing your story with us. Thanks.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for reaching out to me. This was great. This is really cool.
It's so fun. I love to hear stories of success like this. And I know everyone else does too. And it really helps many people. So you have a great night.
I will. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.